transactions to include mergers and acquisitions, licensing, and partnerships. Quite busy working across these various areas of focus. If we can move to the next slide, please. So, to talk a little bit about the strategic planning process within pharmaceutical development and commercialization. This is where I have put most of my focus. So initially, working with a broad team, we bring together a knowledge book. So there's a lot of data that goes into this knowledge book, and it becomes a resource that we can share across our team for understanding a particular disease and the various aspects of that disease, including the unmet needs. We bring together many KOL perspectives, key opinion leader perspectives. We look at what is the current market, who are the current players, and what's the size of the treated population, diagnosis rates, things like that. We look at trends. We look at historical data. And then looking at KOL input as well as some of our own internal expertise, we think about what are the expectations for the future. We also look at many analyst reports, Wall Street analyst reports. There are many resources out there for secondary data. We might even have some primary data that we've done about expectations, as well as opportunities and threats. So that's the knowledge book, and that's the first step. That grounds everybody on what's the basis for moving forward on our strategy. Then we get our teams together, and through the course of several discussions, we narrow down our thinking and develop 2 to 4 well-defined, discrete strategic alternatives for developing a particular compound or a portfolio of drugs. And once we have those well-defined alternatives, we then initiate information gathering about those alternatives to include timelines and budgets for developing those various strategies, what are the probabilities of success for each strategy, and a whole variety of commercial assumptions, such as who are the competitors, what are their profiles, what price could we charge, and how big is the market, all sorts of important commercial assumptions. And once we gather all this information and we put some ranges of uncertainty around them, low, base, and high inputs, then we do our assessment. And this is an NPV assessment using Monte Carlo simulation, and we also do a sensitivity analysis. And we look at what share could we capture with our drug or our regimen, and what revenues could we translate that share into. So what are our revenue projections? Then we develop a fully loaded P&L to start with gross sales and bring it to net sales and include cost of goods and all of our commercial expenses and our R&D costs, and bring it all the way down to after-tax cash flows. And then with the simulation, you determine your 10th, 50th, and 90th percentile of your net present value, and you also conduct a sensitivity analysis to determine your key uncertainties and where are your information gaps. You might go through an iterative process of this assessment to uncover many of these key insights, and it'll actually help you to focus your strategy a little bit better, or maybe focus some of your key assumptions a little bit better. Then you get into your review and revise step, where you're addressing these uncertainties with your management team, with the broad cross-functional team, and you take into account their concerns. Again, you fill in these information gaps, and ultimately you might create a hybrid alternative from the several alternatives you initially started with. One discrete alternative may not answer all of the strategic imperatives that you have, but a hybrid might really get you to an optimal state of your strategy. And finally, you update your assessments and decide on that optimal strategy. And then the last step is to package it and bring it to your senior management for their endorsement. So that's the strategic planning process we go through. And there are a lot of steps involved that require many kinds of data. So if we can go to the next slide, we can talk about that. So the data requirements for conducting that kind of a strategic planning process are many, and they're listed here at kind of at a high level, and I go into a little bit of detail. And typically we need market level data, and we need it from the G7 markets, and those are the U.S., the European 5 countries, which are France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and the UK, and Japan. So those countries constitute the G7 markets. And then, of course, there are the BRIC markets, which are Brazil, Russia, China, and Turkey, and they may or may not come into play for certain markets or certain kinds of assessments, or they may come into play later on in time. Ultimately, the G7 markets are going to drive strategy in most cases because they're going to have the largest amount of revenues and bring the most value to each strategy. But there are in infectious diseases, there are very large populations of infected persons in these BRIC markets, and so we need to account for them because value is not just about money; it's also about treating patients and bringing solutions to those patients throughout the world. So the data requirements are bucketed here in terms of disease epidemiology, competitive intelligence, pricing and reimbursement, and then the current historical sales data. What do we know about our internal program, and then what kind of benchmarks can we use to help fill in some gaps? And so you can see here under disease epidemiology, there's a whole host of patient-level characteristics that we need to know. And there are many sources that we can go to. Decision resources is typically a good first pass one. Sometimes we need to conduct primary research, and we'll use certain vendors to help us with that to understand what's the disease prevalence or the incidence, how many patients are diagnosed and treated per year, how compliant are they on their medicine, how many of them die per year, if there's a disease progression such as in many cancers, what's that progression rate, and how many patients are cured. With respect to competitive intelligence, you need to look at your competitive set and understand what their clinical programs and launch timing are. And a lot of this information is public. Once a competitor begins phase one program, they need to start publishing information, and so it becomes public knowledge, and you can do some competitive estimations on when they might get to market and what their program is going to look like. So then to determine what their product and regimen profiles are, if there are existing products in the market, what shares do they have, and what unmet needs do they leave for the market? And then also look at, when do certain drugs lose their market exclusivity, their patent exclusivity, which could be a big dynamic in the market space, because generics will change the prescribing habits of many of our customers. Pricing and reimbursement is pretty straightforward. What can we charge? What do we think we can charge in several years when our drug comes to market? And what payers will reimburse us? Current and historical sales data will help us to understand the prescribing habits and what kind of revenues certain products are making. And it will also help us to understand if we need to do a worldwide gross up for total revenues around the world to understand what those sales are based on analogs. We need to understand our internal program, and many of the pieces of information we need to know are very similar to what I described for the competitive intelligence. But we also need to understand what's the probability of success, the technical success of our program, the many phases we need to go through, and the different kinds of studies, as well as the regulatory success. And so we have internal experts who can help us to determine that probability of success. And finally, we may need to look at some benchmarks and estimated values for the PTRS or different R&D costs, development timelines, cost of goods and marketing expenses to pull together that P&L, especially in an very early stage of strategic planning when we don't have the time or the other resources to go through an extensive information gathering process. So those are all the different kind of data requirements that we have to conduct a strategic planning process. And I'll stop it there. I think that's a pretty good taste of the kind of work that I do. And I'll turn it back over to Brian. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Very good. Enjoyed that presentation. We're going to have all of your questions for Stephen, or as many as possible, answered at the end of this webinar. So, please keep them coming. And something that we do here at Data Driven Business is we tend to poll our audiences. We ask a few questions throughout the webinar, and we give you all a chance to answer them. In just a few seconds, you should have a poll shared with you here. Let's see if we can pull this up. Again, if you're a little late to join us, we have had some technical difficulties, but it does in fact look like we did get the question up there. What type of challenges does your organization have? And no, unfortunately, we are having trouble. We are having trouble on the back end here, everyone, and we're very apologetic for that. That is in fact the reason that we were late to start. Just having an issue with our back end over here, and again, we do apologize. So I guess what we'll do is we're going to have to scrap these poll questions. Maybe we'll send them out in an email following, but again, not taking away from the webinar any longer. We're going to go into our next presenter here, who's going to be Larry. So Larry, as we try to get you in over here, why don't you get ready for this? All right, Larry, it looks like we have you good to go, and we'll get a screen up there for you in just a moment. Why don't you present your presentation right now?
Great, thanks, Brian. So I don't have slides prepared. My apologies to the audience for that, but I'm happy to talk about the types of work I do at IHG and our big data challenges. So I'm Larry Seligman. I'm head of advanced consumer analytics at Intercontinental Hotels Group. A little bit about the company. Intercontinental Hotels Group has several brands throughout the world: Intercontinental Hotels, Crown Plaza, Holiday Inn, Holiday Inn Express, Staybridge Suites, Candlewood Suites, Hotel Indigo, and a couple of new brands that are coming about. An even hotel brand focused on healthy travel, and a Lolux brand, which would be a born and bred in China, Chinese brand for that market. And with about 4,600 hotels throughout the world, we franchise or manage, and a few of them we own as well. I've been at IHG for 7 years, and prior to that I was in academia. At IHG, I have spent most of my time in predictive and explanatory modeling, so things like customer segmentation, customer level behavior prediction, who's going to stay when with us, where, how long, why, how much they're going to spend, what types of offers are various people going to be receptive to. Private campaign optimization, where we take all that information and apply a budget and constraints to it and figure out what's the right offer for the right person at the right time that will both improve their guest experience and also improve our financial performance. And then the measurement of that as well, measuring incremental revenue lift from those types of campaigns. And then most recently, I've been focused on the guest experience side of the house. So what most companies would recognize as their customer experience, we call guest experience. So we're trying to understand what makes for a great guest experience at an IHG hotel and how we can improve our operations and improve our offerings in order to make our guests prefer our brands and want to come back and stay with us again. Also understand the relationships between guest experience and brand equity measures, and between those two and financial performance, and then also incorporating social media reputation into that, and employee engagement and some other types of metrics to try to build a holistic picture of what's driving our financial performance. So that's kind of the area that I play in. The data sources that we use includes data from bookings and stays, web and interactive media data that comes from our sites, that come from other sites, competitor data, of course, our guest experience data, and also social media data on third-party sites where people post guest reviews, reviews from their stays. They might go to one site and say that they enjoyed our stay at Holiday Inn and enjoy their stay at another brand and telling us about that. So we're bringing in that data to understand how we can improve the guest experience. And then hotel performance data. So it's a variety of data we have to pull in to answer the questions that we have. Big data has been declared one of the key focus areas for us for 2014 and beyond, all the way up to the executive committee. We have historically been using, I had a lot of access to these various big data sources, but have been applying what I'll call small data analytics to it. So predicting or doing explanatory modeling off of a sample instead of off of the entire data set, for instance, or working within the constraints of traditional modeling to understand what we're doing, as opposed to bringing in all the nuances of the full data set. And as we do that, of course, as we move into this area in which we're using bigger data analytics, in which we're using larger samples, we have to consider the bounds of our legal constraints, what we can legally do in our data privacy laws. And then also, beyond that, there's also a good question of when we use some of the data or think about using some of the data that's available to us. Sometimes we have the data, we have the technical capability to use it, but we're asking ourselves, how does that change the view of what the guest sees when they see an IHG brand or an IHG hotel brand? If we use some of the minute data that we have access to, like mobile data, for instance, is that going to change their perception of us? Because we want to make sure that we are strengthening our relationship with the guests. We're not tearing it down by using data without thinking through the implications of how that might affect perceptions. So we talk about those things a lot and figure out what to do and work towards the best solution. We've been using that kind of data for a while in terms of the guest level predictions, as I mentioned before. We're starting to use it now in terms of things like attribution analysis to understand in the journey from where the guest is considering travel all the way through the booking process, the selection process, the booking process, the stay, the check-in, the guest experience at the property, the check-out. How are we adding value and how are we not adding value? Can we figure out, can we bring all these data sources together that we have and attribute aspects of the performance to those things? So we are using big data approaches to attribution analysis now to help us with that. And we're also looking at how to improve on our holistic view of the voice of the guest. So where we've got disparate data sources such as our internal guest satisfaction surveys, our IHG branded guest review sites, since we collect our own reviews of our hotels, third-party reviews from other travel sites, and then other types of comments about us that are in the main social media space, your Twitter and all that. How do we round this out into a complete view of what the guests are experiencing? How can we improve our operations? So that's a new area for us, or an area that we've been working on for a while, but it's new in the sense that we're still trying to find the great combination of those things in order to give us a good picture of what we're doing. And I thought it was, one other thing I wanted to add was, I thought it was interesting in that poll that we weren't able to conduct a comment about data integration. So data integration means something different now than it used to. data integration used to mean ETL, and how do we get data from different platforms linked together and this type of thing. And now it's different when you're talking about big data. Sometimes really the financial benefit of actually figuring out the linkages to data in a traditional ETL setting, it might not be there to build a massive data warehouse, even using your Hadoops and your commodity technologies. There are other products, Oracle and Deca, for instance, that pull those things together and give an analysis of those types of things without building the ETL. And so we're asking ourselves about products like that. And of course, there are other products as well that essentially do an analysis of data without physically co-locating the data or building out strong connections and the like, and having more flexible data models instead of having rigid table structures and view structures. So we're kind of rethinking what does data integration look like going forward, because clearly we have options now that we didn't have before, and we now need to think about what we're going to be doing in terms of that in the future. And that's kind of the picture of what I do and what we're working on at IHG in the big data space.
Thank you very much, Larry. A question actually just came through for you, and we don't usually do this, but if you wouldn't mind just describing what you meant by ETL, and then we'll go ahead and go with Majar from HP.
Sure. So ETL is the process by which we are taking data from whatever source system we have, whether it's the property management systems at the hotels or any other types of source systems, and we're trying to get it from those source systems into operational data stores, into a data warehouse, where we can then run all kinds of analytics, and we can run the business essentially off of these types of things. But it's the extract, transform, load process by which we move data around and get it formally set up into, well, to this point, into traditional data structures where you could then do typical types of queries on those types of things. So in the past, data integration has looked like this process of let's get all these disparate data sources and figure out how to link them together and have very well-defined columns and rows and tables and views and databases and dimensions and fact tables and the like, so that we can explain questions, and we've got it all mapped out at the beginning. So now what I'm talking about is you don't have to go through all that necessarily to bring data together into a single analysis. And so we're asking the question, what does data integration look like in the future now that there are alternatives to traditional ETL? Does that make sense?
Excellent. Yeah, thanks a lot, Larry. We appreciate that, and stick around for, again, a Q&A with the three gentlemen that we have on this program. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce everyone to Majar Hussain, who's a big data analytics leader over at HP. And it looks like, Majar, you can take us away. When you need a new slide, let me know.
All right, thanks, Brian. Can you hear me okay?
Seem to have you just fine. Thanks, Majar.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Just like to walk you guys through on some of the industry, how the industry looking like right now. I've been with big data analytics here in HP, and if you can please, Brian, walk to the next slide. Hi, Brian. Can you walk to the next slide?
Yeah, Majar, we're working on some technical issues here. We've had them all day, so why don't you just proceed, and it'll show up. It's on the delay. Sorry about that.
All right, no problem. Just like to talk about here the 214 analytics strategy. Some of the key things which we are seeing here in the data analytics is one thing is for sure now making the paradigm. The data analytics will define the way businesses operate and the organizations operate in the future. We are seeing a continuous
growing confidence in the big data product and services going forward. Growing maturity of these products is also driving the future growth as well. And addition of better security and governance in the data is also one of the key factors there. People are seeing data as the new oil right now in terms of, a lot of things are coming up there in terms of the data. Brian, can you go back to the previous slide, please? Hi, Brian, if you can switch to the previous slide, please. Yeah. So market trends are certainly, in terms of business analytics, will remain certainly the CIO top priority in technology in 2014. And big data will be rapidly seeing changes in infrastructure. We're seeing close to 232 billion in the IT spending in 2016 going forward. And then in also in terms of the growth there, we are also seeing a potentially market of 116 billion in terms of the total market cap in 2014, and going to go into 2017 around 160 billion. Like I said, data is maturing kind of thing, and its maturity stage is driving the advanced analytical capability as well. And people are trying to get into more of improving the decision making by utilizing the business processes as well. 2014 we expect will be an exciting year for applying now from the data to the analytics side. In terms of businesses, we are seeing the analytics becoming the game of the new future. In terms of analytics have started to transform the program directly into the business goals. People are seeing the value of data now being utilized and building the analytics on top of that. Like I said earlier, data is the new oil, and people are leveraging data as enterprise assets. We're seeing also emergence of new governance in the companies, such as the chief data officer as well. A lot of companies are looking into that kind of sentiments as well. Organizations are certainly under increasing pressure in terms of managing their data better and amount of data they gather and how to utilize that going forward. That is the key thing, and like I said, analytics is driving that. Brian, if you can please pull to the next slide. 2014, like I said, is the key year in terms of big data analytics. A lot of key things are happening there in terms of the strategic focus. The key front there is the purpose of analytics is how the users are going to utilize the analytics and trying to infer this information in terms of being analyzed and utilizing as certainly a golden nugget. Data is becoming a pretty key thing in the organization with a strong analytics culture. We are seeing a lot of sentiment around that. A lot of companies are now seeing the data as a key asset in the enterprise, and they're trying to assess them in terms of their readiness, how they are certainly being managed, the analytic resources, how they're going to create the analytical capability there, and also how is the support from the top management in terms of the insight. The companies are looking at how they're ready for that in terms of the insight. People are trained for that. There have enough people who can run those analysis and can do certainly a good, utilize of this data, and also different tools and technologies and training, and also enabling the people in terms of readiness. Data sources, what type of data, and it's a structured data or unstructured, and how to implement that in the implementation kind of mode as well. Those are key things seeing going forward in terms of the analytical culture, and going forward how this has been going to utilize. Key focus areas are the visual is also becoming a pretty interesting thing going forward in terms of getting needed information in the right form to the right people, certainly in the right time. And we are seeing a lot of emphasis on the visualization. Machine learning and algorithmic such as NLP language, etc., also becoming pretty important. certainly holistic view, like 360 degrees of customer, who is the customer, and what type of needs are there on the customer side. Do customer knows us really well to really utilize those engagement from us or not? Predictive and prospective modelings are certainly going to lead going forward, and also the data-driven and smart marketing. A lot of emphasis in terms of digital marketing and the utilization of data in the marketing, how to really do the campaign management, to do the right campaigns, and also do the right segmentation and behavior analysis of customers, and trying to gauge those customers with the right kind of information and a customer enablement and also customer loyalty there. Fraud detection is another area where there's a lot of emphasis is going to go forward, utilizing this humongous amount of data which is there. And then is emerging and transactional data also, such as people when come to your website and click streams and other kind of behavior data can give us ability to really utilize that and try to formulate the strategy based on that. Another area is also going to go pretty interesting going forward is the HR analytics and driving data-driven decision based on your hiring, etc., and also rewarding the employees kind of thing. So there's a lot of sentiment and excitement in certain different areas. So I can just pause here and take a question if you have any on those.
Thank you very much, Majar. In fact, what we're going to do right now, everyone, is we're going to take a few of the questions that you all sent through and ask some of them to all of our panelists. So I'm going to unmute everyone right now, and we're going to have a nice
Unmuted.
Again, we must apologize to everybody throughout this entire process. It's certainly been tedious on the back end over here, and we do apologize, and we'll find some great way to make it up to you all, as this was not our intention. So we're going to go ahead and ask the first question to Larry. We'll quickly open this up as he was the most recent speaker on the issue. Larry, really quick, how did you go about researching the definition of a good guest experience?
Well, there are a few excellent old-school data sources to help us with that. Those are the folks who have worked in our quality areas within IHG for a number of years, our hotel GMs, hotel staff. They give us their insight on what the guest experience is like, and of course we get tons of feedback from the guest itself to figure out what that looks like as well. And we have been working in various organizational forms to structure ourselves around providing that best guest experience. But that model has, to this point at least, come out of the experiences we've had in the past. It hasn't been big data driven. Now it might be once we get to this utopia of widely linked big data that we might understand the guest experience differently. There are nuances of it. There are different segments of guest experiences, because you could segment guest experiences if you like, for instance, and see how different guests are going to have different types of things happen to them and do different things during that. So you could do that if you want to from a big data perspective, but it's a lot about the knowledge of people so far.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Stephen, why don't we start with you on this one? A lot of folks on the webinar have been asking about analytics needs gaps and with regards to tools. Why don't you quickly touch on what some of your goals are in analytics in 2014, and if you'd like to discuss a tool or two, certainly the floor is yours. Stephen, you still with us?
Yes, I am. Yeah, one of the biggest areas where we needed a tool recently was with respect to competitive share forecasting. And we worked with a company called Information, and they have a tool called FlexiCast, and we've just adopted their tool. But other areas where we will need tools, I think with respect to market access, I'm not an expert in the market access space. We have many colleagues who are working specifically in that space. But this has been an area where it's been very hard to project what kind of reimbursement and access we'll get with our product pre-launch. But it has a big impact on our ability to market our products. So tools with respect to market access. Also, I think maybe a grand kind of integrated forecasting suite of tools is something that could be useful in the future, as well as a kind of a cloud system for data integration, where you have your market research, your market access, your forecasting, your R&D, and many other inputs and key pieces of information that will drive forecasting and decision making. To put it into a cloud-based system where various users have different access rights and can submit or pull data and pull reports very easily. So those are some of the areas where we could use tools.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephen. Larry, we're going to go back to you really quickly. A little bit away from the tools. A few questions have just come in, really good ones, kind of tied in together. Complaints, are they also part of your feedback process, and how are these integrated into the big data loop? And why don't you tie that in, Larry, with how widespread is analytics and big data in the hotel industry as a more of a general overview? Let's try to keep it to under a minute if we can as well.
Okay. So complaints, yes, absolutely. And it has been a huge focus of ours to deal with problem resolution, which is our phrasing for dealing with the complaints the guests have. We have KPOs at high levels attached to improving those types of rates, and they are incorporated in a variety of ways. There are the general types of just categorization of them. There's manual viewing of them. There's analysis, picking them apart, categorizing them, letting the hotels know, letting region and brand leadership know. They're dissected quite a bit. As far as the pervasiveness of this within the industry, you're generally looking at the same types of things from most of the companies, at least the ones that I'm familiar with, in that we're figuring out where there's value to add to go to a new technology, a new tool, this kind of thing. I don't know that it is all perfectly pieced together in any one company, but everyone's moving in the direction of being able to build out a view of the guest experience. I think the types of things that I've talked about are fairly common, plus or minus a little bit for various competitors throughout the industry.
Thanks, Larry. Appreciate that. Let's move on to Majar. Question for you. How do you structure and make data usable for analytics?
Okay, thanks, Brian. I think the key thing is to really, first of all, looking at both sides of the data, such as unstructured and structured. And the key thing is, there are a couple of different technologies which are available. Hadoop is certainly big. That is being utilized for storing the data. We use different tools and technologies such as R and Python and MATLAB. Those are different kind of languages which you can utilize to really orchestrate your unstructured data, and also you integrate with the structured data as well. So those are different kind of tools and technologies. We have a state-of-the-art also analytical database platform here, which is called Vertica in HP, which we also utilize for running through this, structured data as well. And then we have a combination of unstructured with Hadoop, and we have a tool which is Autonomy. So this is a Haven platform which has been utilized in HP for running the structured and as well as unstructured data. So that's the answer on your question. And Brian, back to you.
Thank you, Majar. Appreciate that. You know, it's very interesting. We have a lot of questions that are coming through. I wish we could get to all of them, but we are in a little bit of a time-sensitive situation here. I'm going to ask the final question to Stephen because a number of people had asked about applying analytics with regards to the pharmaceutical industry. Stephen, a very specific but targeted question that could actually help in other industries. Do you apply analytics to clinical reports of patients to predict diseases? So kind of touching on predictive analytics here.
Yes, yeah, we pull patient records. I mean, it's all sanitized, but we can pull patient records in large volumes from some various markets and see what the trends are in terms of diagnosis and treatment, and look at those trends to try to project forward what will be the ongoing trends. I mean, I've seen an epidemiologist in our group who looked at data as far back as 1950 to see when the start of the disease occurred, you know, for hepatitis, and projected it forward into the future. And she took me through all of her thinking. And much of it has to do with pulling those patient records and then speaking with KOL, speaking with our internal experts, and applying the expertise of the epidemiologist to do that predictive analytics.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate it. That was a very good answer, very brief. We have time for one more question. It's going to incorporate all three panelists. In summation, give me 3 things that should be added to your analytics strategy in 2014. Stephen, start with you, then Larry, then Majar. Go for it, Stephen.
3 things that should be added to the analytics strategy. Yeah, like I said, I think we need to start working on a cloud-based system to integrate all data. We need to have more access to the analytics. The analysts within our group need to have more access to kind of the eyeforpharma type of groups and this kind of group. And so this is great. I'm glad you have this forum. And I think just broader interaction and training across the various sectors of J&J, not just within pharma, to share best practices.
Thank you, Stephen. Larry?
A couple I've already mentioned. One is thinking about what the new definition of data integration is going to be going forward. A second is about now that we've got all this new data and new ways of analyzing, what can we measure now that we used to not be able to measure before? What are the new metrics we can do? And then third is related to the second one. Now that we've got new things we can measure, how can we value the projects and the programs that we have going in new ways that we didn't understand the value of before? Can we now quantify things that we previously could not quantify?
Excellent. Thank you, Larry. And finally, Majar.
Yes, thanks, Brian. I think I can build on what Larry has just said, but one of the things which is important is going forward, analytics as a service is going to take a pretty big stream going forward. We are seeing a lot of traction in the market, and there's mid-sized and small customers who are also trying to take big advantage of that. So analytics as a service is going to become certainly predominantly going forward. Also, another thing which is important, people like to see ROI on the analytics. So I think another area where people will be measuring, and there's the keen trend, how are they going to benefit from the analytics? And the third important thing is the blessing of analytics across the culture in the company. It's important to have the right kind of strategy implemented in the company. People, like I said, a lot of companies are looking at chief data officer or chief analytic officer kind of thing and trying to bless that in their culture so the implementation is across the board and they're retrieving the benefit of that implementation.
Thank you very much, Majar. You know, Majar, you actually touched on 3 huge issues that we'll actually be covering at the Useful Business Analytics Summit. So either you did a really good job reading the brochure, or our research has been relatively spot on. But regardless of how you came about that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, certainly our 3 panelists, Stephen, Larry, and Majar. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, brian@fc-bi.com. We'll certainly be publishing the slides and the audio. We'll get them to you guys hopefully within the week. But again, we want to thank all of our panelists. On behalf of Data Driven Business, thank you very much for joining us all today. And again, if you have any questions, fire them over, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.